He wasn't supposed to be there. Just a tired father, cleaning up after everyone else, until one moment changed everything. One leap turned the whole gym upside down, but the dunk was just the beginning. Because that single move would uncover a secret. One the people in power never wanted out. Why did he risk it all in front of the entire school? And when the truth finally comes out, will it make him a hero? Or destroy everything he's been fighting for? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. If you enjoyed the story of Noah Rivera, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the rain-streaked windows of St. Luke's Community Hospital lobby. Eli Brooks moved his mop in slow, steady strokes across the gleaming floor, humming Amazing Grace under his breath. The familiar melody helped him find peace in the quiet moments of his workday, even if being a janitor wasn't exactly where he'd pictured himself at this point in his life. His eyes drifted occasionally to the small boy sitting rigid on a nearby bench. Noah Rivera, everyone knew who he was, the silent child who hadn't spoken since coming to live with Vivian Chen 6 months ago. The boy clutched a red toy truck like it was a lifeline, his knuckles white against the plastic. A few feet away stood Vivian Chen herself, every inch the powerful CEO in her crisp navy suit and perfectly styled hair. She kept her attention fixed on her phone screen, though Eli noticed how she glanced at Noah every few seconds, worry creasing the corners of her eyes. The gentle rhythm of rain against glass filled the lobby. Tap, tap, tap. Eli let his mop move in time with it, adding another layer to the quiet symphony of the evening. He'd learned long ago, both in the Army and later as a choir director, that rhythm could be a powerful source of comfort. Without warning, a harsh electronic screech cut through the peace. The fire alarm system. Vivian Chen's heels clicked rapidly against the polished floor as she retreated to the glass-walled corridor, her usual composure cracking. She pressed her fingertips beneath her eyes, catching the tears before they could smear her makeup. The last time she'd cried in public was, she couldn't even remember. Through the glass, she watched Eli still kneeling beside Noah, keeping a respectful distance but maintaining that gentle, rhythmic tapping. Her son, usually so closed off from the world, was actually looking at someone other than her or Marisol. "Get it together," she whispered to herself, pulling a tissue from her blazer pocket. Years of board meetings and investor presentations had taught her how to rebuild her walls quickly. 3 deep breaths. A quick check of her reflection in the glass. Shoulders back, chin up. When she re-entered the lobby, Dr. Patel was already there, her purple hijab bright against her white coat. The speech therapist's eyes were wide with interest as she observed Noah and Eli from the reception desk. "Mrs. Chen," Dr. Patel said softly, turning toward her. "The security guard just told me what happened. Noah spoke?" "A whisper," Vivian corrected, her voice carefully controlled. "Just a syllable or two. It was probably nothing." Dr. Patel shook her head, her expression warm but serious. "With selective mutism, Mrs. Chen, any voluntary vocalization is significant. May I ask what prompted it?" Vivian gestured toward Eli, who was now standing respectfully to the side, mop in hand. "Mr. Brooks here." He started tapping and humming when the alarm scared Noah. "Music therapy through rhythm engagement," Dr. Patel said, nodding appreciatively. "It's a recognized technique, though usually not this spontaneous. Mr. Brooks, do you have any musical training?" Eli shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with the attention. "Yes, ma'am. Used to direct church choirs, before." He trailed off, shrugging. Just seemed natural to try and calm him down. Dr. Patel turned back to Vivian. "Mrs. Chen, we've tried traditional speech therapy for months with limited progress. Sometimes unconventional approaches yield breakthrough moments. Would you consider allowing some supervised musical interaction sessions?" Vivian crossed her arms, her protective instincts flaring. "You mean with Mr. Brooks? He's not a certified therapist." "Under my supervision, of course," Dr. Patel assured her. "Short sessions, perhaps during his evening shifts, when the lobby is quiet. We can document everything properly." "Why?" Vivian studied Noah, who was back to silently clutching his truck, but seemed more relaxed than usual. The business part of her brain calculated risks, liability issues, proper protocols, board reactions. But that whispered "Dad" kept echoing in her mind. "A trial period," she said finally. 2 weeks, fully supervised. And if there's any sign of distress, we'll stop immediately, Dr. Patel agreed. She turned to Eli. "Mr. Brooks, would you be willing? It would be outside your usual duties." Eli looked from Noah to Vivian, then back to Dr. Patel. His face showed the internal struggle, the desire to help warring with the awareness of his position. "I don't want to overstep," he said carefully. "I'm just the janitor here." "You're someone who just got my son to whisper for the first time in 6 months?" Vivian said, surprising herself with the softness in her voice. "That makes you more than just anything." Eli's shoulders straightened slightly. "Then yes, I'd be honored to try. As long as it's okay with Noah." They all looked at the boy, who had been watching their conversation with those observant eyes of his. Dr. Patel crouched down to his level. "Noah, would you like to spend some time making music with Mr. Brooks? Just little bits, when you feel like it?" Noah's fingers tapped once against his truck, so subtle they might have missed it if they weren't watching. But Dr. Patel smiled like he'd just given a speech. "I believe that's a yes," she said, standing. "We can start tomorrow evening, if that works for everyone." They worked out the details: timing, supervision schedules, documentation requirements. Through it all, Vivian noticed how Eli kept his responses respectful but direct, how he asked intelligent questions about Noah's previous therapy attempts. There was more to this janitor than met the eye. As his shift ended, Eli collected his cleaning cart and headed for the exit. The automatic doors opened to a light drizzle, and Vivian watched through the lobby windows as he pulled up his collar against the rain. That same hymn from earlier drifted back as he walked toward the parking lot, barely audible through the glass. Noah pressed his small hand against the window, following Eli's departure with his eyes. And for the first time in months, Vivian saw something new in her son's expression: interest. Morning sunlight streamed through the Brookses' kitchen window, casting warm squares on the worn linoleum floor. Eli stood at the stove, expertly flipping pancakes while humming "Amazing Grace." The familiar tune filled their small but cozy kitchen. "Dad, you're humming again," Lena said, looking up from her phone at the kitchen table. "I heard you're the talk of St. Luke's now, the miracle music man." Eli shook his head, sliding 2 perfectly golden pancakes onto her plate. "Nothing miraculous about it, honey. Just trying to help a scared kid feel safe." "That's not what I heard." Lena's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Sarah's mom works in billing, and she said everyone's talking about how you got the silent boy to speak." It was barely a whisper. Eli poured more batter onto the griddle. "And people shouldn't be gossiping about a child's private matters." "But Dad, you actually made a difference. When was the last time someone at that hospital noticed what you can do?" Eli's shoulders tensed slightly. "I'm just the janitor, Lena. That's all I need to be." "You were a choir director for 15 years, Lena protested, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "And a good one, Mom always said." She stopped short, both of them feeling the familiar ache that came with mentioning Claire. Eli put down his spatula and sat across from his daughter. "Your mother believed in using music to heal. That's all I was doing yesterday, what she taught me." The drive to school was quiet at first, raindrops making patterns on the windshield. Lena fiddled with the radio, finally settling on a gospel station. "Remember how Mom used to sing this one?" she asked softly as a familiar hymn played. "Every Sunday," Eli smiled. "She'd be warming up in the kitchen and you'd join in from your room. Music got us through it, didn't it, after she—" Lena trailed off, watching the wipers sweep back and forth. "It still does, baby girl. It still does." Later that evening, Eli positioned a small wooden stool near his cleaning cart in the empty pediatric wing. He'd chosen this quiet corridor carefully, good acoustics, but away from the busy areas. His mop and bucket stood ready, maintaining the appearance of regular work. He heard them before he saw them, the soft shuffle of Noah's sneakers and Marisol's steady footsteps. The elderly housekeeper rounded the corner first, one hand protectively on Noah's shoulder. Her dark eyes took in every detail of the setup. "Senor Brooks," she said with careful warmth. "Noah has been tapping his fingers all day waiting for this." Eli smiled, crouching down to Noah's level. "Hey there, buddy. Remember our special rhythm from yesterday?" Noah clutched his toy truck tighter but didn't look away. Eli started a gentle tap-tap-tap against his knee. "Like rainfall," he said softly. "Want to make some rain with me?" Noah's free hand twitched. Slowly, deliberately, he tapped his truck against the stool, matching Eli's rhythm perfectly. "That's beautiful music," Eli encouraged. He began humming low and sweet, a simple melody that rose and fell like waves. Marisol watched intently, her expression softening as Noah's shoulders gradually relaxed. The boy's eyes stayed fixed on the pattern his truck made against the wood. Noah's whisper was barely there. Eli kept the rhythm steady, his voice gentle. "That's right. What's in your hand?" "Tree. Uck." The word came out complete this time, though still whisper. Soft. Marisol pressed a hand to her heart, tears welling in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away with her apron. They continued like this for several minutes. Tap, hum, whisper, repeat. Noah's grip on his truck loosened slightly, his breathing deep and even. The click of heels against tile announced Vivian's arrival. She stood in the doorway, her tailored suit a stark contrast to the casual setting. For a long moment, she just watched, her expression unreadable as her son made quiet music with the janitor. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Noah, time to go home, sweetheart." Vivian Chen's office gleamed with modern minimalism, all glass, chrome, and pristine white surfaces. She stood behind her desk, hands clasped, as Eli Brooks entered. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the space feel both expansive and oddly confining. "Mr. Brooks," Vivian said, her voice precise and measured. "Please, have a seat." Eli settled into one of the sleek chairs facing her desk, his weathered janitor's uniform a stark contrast to the polished surroundings. "I want to be very clear about the parameters of these music sessions," Vivian began, pulling out a typed document. "There are non-negotiable ground rules we need to establish." "Of course," Eli nodded, his calm demeanor unchanged. "First, there will be no physical contact with Noah unless absolutely necessary for safety reasons." Vivian's fingers tapped against the paper. "All interactions must take place in public spaces, the lobby, the children's ward common area, or the cafeteria, always where others can see." "Understood." "And most importantly," Vivian's dark eyes fixed on him intently, "you cannot make any promises to Noah. No guarantees about future sessions, no commitments about being there for him. She paused, collecting herself. "He's vulnerable to disappointment." Eli considered her words carefully before responding. "Miss Chen, I respect these boundaries. But music isn't just about rules and spaces. It's about connection. Trust." "Trust can be dangerous," Vivian countered. "So can the lack of it." Eli's voice remained gentle but firm. "If Noah's going to open up through music, he needs to feel safe. Warmth is part of that safety." A flicker of something, perhaps recognition, crossed Vivian's face before she masked it. "We can schedule 3 30-minute sessions per week, Tuesday and Thursday evenings and Saturday afternoon." "That works for me," Eli agreed. "I'll coordinate with Dr. Patel about the best approaches. I'll have security and nursing staff notified of the arrangement." Vivian began typing on her laptop. "We'll review progress in 2 weeks." Later that evening, the hospital cafeteria hummed with the quiet activity of the dinner hour. Eli and his daughter Lena sat at a corner table, surrounded by homework papers and containers of Chinese takeout. "So this is where the magic happens, huh?" Lena asked, twirling lo mein around her fork. "Pretty fancy for a hospital cafeteria." "It's just a job, sweetie," Eli reminded her, but his eyes crinkled with affection. "Right, just a job where you're basically the child whisperer." Lena grinned, then suddenly straightened. "Oh, is that him?" Eli turned to see Noah entering the cafeteria with Marisol, his toy truck clutched tight as always. The boy's eyes darted around the room nervously until they landed on Eli. "Evening, Noah," Eli called softly. "Would you like to join us?" Noah hesitated, but Marisol gave him a gentle nudge. "Go ahead, mijito. I'll be right here." The boy approached cautiously, stopping a few feet from their table. Lena smiled warmly and pointed to his truck. "That's a cool truck you've got there," she said. "Does it make awesome truck noises?" She demonstrated with an exaggerated vroom vroom, complete with silly facial expressions. Noah's eyes widened, and the tiniest smile tugged at his lips. Encouraged, Lena continued, adding sound effects for screeching brakes and honking horns. A small giggle escaped Noah's throat, surprising everyone, including himself. Eli watched the interaction with quiet joy, noting how his daughter's natural warmth had accomplished in seconds what others had tried for months to achieve. But movement caught his eye, and he glanced up to see Vivian Chen standing in the cafeteria doorway. She stood perfectly still, watching the scene unfold. Her face showed a complex mix of emotions: longing, fear, hope, and something else harder to name. For a moment, she seemed about to step forward, to join them, perhaps. Instead, she turned and walked away without a word, her heels clicking rapidly against the tile floor. Noah didn't notice her departure. He was too busy showing Lena how his truck's wheels could spin, his small hands animated as he demonstrated. Marisol beamed from her spot near the door, and other cafeteria workers paused in their tasks to witness this unexpected moment of connection. "Hey, Noah," Lena said, pulling out the chair next to her. "Want to see how I make my homework more fun?" I turn it into a song. She started tapping her pencil in a simple rhythm. 2 + 2 = 4, add some more, and you get more. Noah climbed into the chair, truck still in hand, and began tapping along with her. His eyes stayed focused on the pencil's movement, but his body had relaxed, the rigid tension in his shoulders melting away. Eli watched his daughter work her own kind of magic, her natural ability to create safe spaces reminding him so much of Claire. He pulled out his phone to text Dr. Patel about including Lena in future sessions, partly. Sometimes the best medicine came from unexpected sources. The cafeteria lights buzzed softly overhead as evening settled in, casting a warm glow over the small group at the corner table. For now, at least, the strict boundaries and careful rules seemed less important than the simple joy of a child finding his way back to laughter, one truck noise at a time. The conference hall sparkled under soft chandelier light, the gentle clink of glasses and murmur of conversation filling the air. Men in crisp suits and women in elegant dresses mingled near tables draped in cream-colored linens. Small flower arrangements dotted the surfaces, their sweet scent mixing with the aroma of catered hors d'oeuvres. Eli Brooks moved quietly through the crowd, his steps practiced and unobtrusive. He carried a silver pitcher, refilling water glasses with careful precision. His uniform had been freshly pressed for the occasion, but he still felt out of place among the designer labels and diamond jewelry. Near the center of the room, Vivian Chen commanded attention in a tailored navy dress, her posture perfect as she spoke with potential donors. Her smile was practiced but didn't quite reach her eyes. Every few minutes, she would glance across the room to where Noah sat with Marisol, coloring quietly at a corner table. "The pediatric wing renovation plans are quite impressive," one older gentleman said, accepting a fresh glass of water from Eli with barely a glance. "The new therapy spaces will make such a difference." "That's our hope," Vivian replied, her voice smooth and controlled. "Children heal better in environments designed with their needs in mind." The main doors opened, and a ripple of excitement passed through the crowd. Graham Grayson stepped into the hall, his silver hair catching the light, his smile confident and practiced. He moved with the easy grace of someone who had never doubted his welcome in any room. "Graham, so glad you could make it," called out one of the board members, hurrying over to shake his hand. Eli watched as Graham worked the room, stopping to chat with various groups, his laugh carrying across the space. The man had a way of making each person feel like the focus of his attention, even as his eyes constantly scanned the crowd. Near the corner, Noah had abandoned his coloring books. While Marisol was distracted by a waiter offering appetizers, the boy slipped from his chair. His small feet carried him through the forest of adult legs, weaving between conversations unnoticed. Eli saw it happening as if in slow motion. Noah's determined path led straight to where Graham stood, telling an animated story to a cluster of admirers. The boy reached Graham just as the man gestured broadly, nearly bumping into Noah's head. Graham looked down, his practiced smile faltering for just a moment as he registered the small figure at his waist. The cluster of listeners parted slightly, creating a pocket of space around them. Noah's face turned up to Graham's, his eyes wide and serious. The room seemed to hold its breath as the boy's lips parted. His whisper, though soft, carried in the sudden quiet, "Mommy says you're my daddy." The silence that followed was absolute. Glasses stopped clinking. Conversations died mid-word. The only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioning overhead. Graham's face drained of color, his tan becoming ashen. His hand, still raised mid-gesture, trembled slightly before dropping to his side. What did you say?" he managed, his smooth voice cracking. Across the room, Vivian stood frozen, her water glass suspended halfway to her lips. The perfect mask she usually wore cracked, revealing a flash of raw emotion before hardening into something cold and impenetrable. Her knuckles whitened around the glass stem. Whispers began rippling through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Eli could catch fragments as he stood rooted in place, the water pitcher heavy in his hands. Did he say, "Chen's boy"? "Graham Grayson"? Couldn't be. Marisol pushed through the crowd, her face tight with worry. "Noah, mi amor," she called softly, reaching for him. But Noah remained fixed in place, still staring up at Graham with that solemn expression. Security guards appeared at the edges of the room, moving with careful discretion. One approached Noah and Marisol, while another positioned himself near Graham, who had started to take a step toward the boy. "I think it's time for Noah's evening routine." Vivian's voice cut through the whispers, sharp as crystal. She hadn't moved from her spot, but her words carried clear authority. The security guard gently guided Noah away, Marisol following close behind. As they passed through the crowd, Noah's small face showed confusion at the tension he couldn't fully understand. His eyes darted between Graham and his mother, searching for answers no one seemed ready to give. Eli watched Vivian's posture grow even more rigid, if that was possible. Her chin lifted slightly, and her eyes, when they met Graham's across the room, held steel. The elegant party had transformed into a battlefield, with invisible lines being drawn across the polished floor. The water pitcher felt like an anchor in Eli's hands as he witnessed this unfolding drama. He recognized the look of a mother preparing for war, having seen it years ago in his late wife's eyes when she'd fought for their daughter. But there was something else in Vivian's stance. A deep, old pain, carefully hidden beneath layers of control, now threatening to break through. Graham appeared to recover some of his composure, smoothing his tie with one hand and offering a practiced laugh to those nearest him. "Kids say the darndest things, don't they?" He attempted, but his usual charm fell flat in the charged atmosphere. The security guard escorted Noah and Marisol toward the lobby doors. Just before they disappeared from view, Noah glanced back one last time. The confusion on his small face cut through all the adult tension like a knife through silk. Vivian remained statue still, her face a masterpiece of controlled fury, as conversations gradually resumed around her, though now in more urgent, hushed tones. The easy warmth of the donor mixer had vanished, replaced by something sharp and dangerous, like shards of broken glass hidden under silk. The study was dark except for a single desk lamp, its warm glow falling across Vivian's hands as she held the photograph. The image showed a young woman in hospital scrubs, her smile bright and hopeful. Camila Rivera had her mother Marisol's same warm eyes and gentle presence, even frozen in time on glossy paper. Vivian's finger traced the edge of the photo. Her normally perfect posture had softened, shoulders curving inward as she leaned over her desk. The ticking of an antique clock on the wall marked time in the quiet room. Her phone buzzed. A text from Graham. She ignored it, setting the photo down carefully next to a stack of legal documents. The NDA's signature line caught the light, Graham's flourishing pen strokes a reminder of promises made and broken. The door chimed. Vivian straightened, squaring her shoulders and tucking away any trace of emotion. "Come in," she called, her voice steady and controlled. Graham entered, still wearing his tuxedo from the mixer, though his bow tie hung loose around his neck. "We need to talk, Vivian." "There's nothing to discuss." She stood, hands pressed flat against the desk. The agreement was clear. That was before. Graham moved further into the room, his polished shoes silent on the thick carpet. "Things have changed. The boy knows about me now." "Because you couldn't resist dropping hints to Camila's mother." Vivian's words cut like ice. "Did you think Marisol wouldn't eventually tell him stories about his birth mother? About the wealthy man who dated her daughter, then vanished when things got complicated?" Graham flinched, but recovered quickly. "I was young. Stupid. I've changed." "Have you?" Vivian's laugh held no warmth. "You're still trying to buy your way out of responsibility. Only now you want to purchase forgiveness with hospital donations and naming rights." "I want to know my son." Graham's voice rose slightly. "I have rights." "You signed them away." Vivian pulled out the NDA. "Along with a very generous settlement that helped pay Camila's medical bills after the accident. The same accident she was rushing to after you called her in distress, claiming you needed her." Graham's face tightened. "That's not fair. I didn't know she would." "Drive across town in a storm to help you? Trust that you actually cared?" Vivian's control slipped, anger bleeding through. "She believed in you right until the end, even after you ghosted her when she told you she was pregnant." "I'll fight this," Graham said, his charm replaced by cold determination. "I have the resources for a long legal battle. The press would love the story. Heartless CEO keeping a father from his child. Try it." Vivian's voice dropped dangerously low. "I have copies of every message you sent begging Camila to take care of the problem. Every threat you made about ruining her career if she kept the baby. Every receipt from the settlement you paid to stay out of Noah's life." Graham's jaw clenched. "People change. I've changed. I want to make things right." "No." Vivian moved around the desk to face him directly. "You want to ease your conscience without accepting consequences. Noah isn't a PR opportunity. He's a child who's been through enough trauma." In the hallway outside, Eli was finishing his evening rounds when raised voices caught his attention. He paused near Vivian's partially open door, cloth in hand, pretending to clean a window. "Can't keep using Camila's death as an excuse," Graham's voice carried clearly. "I'm using it as a reason," Dr. Patel's voice responded. "She must have arrived during the confrontation. Noah's selective mutism started after losing his birth mother. He needs stability and trust, not a custody battle. The boy deserves to know his father. The boy deserves peace." Vivian cut in. "Which is exactly what Camila wanted when she asked me to adopt him before she died. To give him a chance at a life without your family's judgment and manipulation." Eli's hand stilled on the glass. Pieces clicked into place. Noah's silence, Marisol's protective watchfulness, Vivian's rigid control, all of it circling around loss and fear and love. "This isn't over," Graham's voice growled. Footsteps approached the door. Eli quickly moved down the hall, ducking into his supply closet as Graham stormed past. In the small space that smelled of cleaning products and damp mops, Eli leaned against the deep sink. His reflection in the small mirror looked troubled. The simple job of keeping floors clean and toilets stocked had grown complicated. He now knew secrets that could hurt people he was starting to care about. He thought of Noah's tiny, whispered dad, of Vivian's tears in the lobby, of Marisol's gentle guidance. He thought of his own daughter Lena, and how far he would go to protect her from pain. The smart thing would be to step back, keep his head down, do his job. But as he stood in the quiet closet, surrounded by the tools of his trade, Eli knew he had already chosen his path. The only question was what that choice would cost. The stained glass windows of St. Luke's Chapel cast long shadows across the wooden pews as evening light filtered through. Eli sat in the front row with Dr. Patel and Pastor Ruth, their voices hushed in the sacred space. "Music speaks when words fail," Pastor Ruth said, her silver hair catching the colored light. "I've seen it work miracles in my chaplaincy days." Dr. Patel nodded, her clipboard balanced on her knee. "The research supports it. Children with selective mutism often respond to rhythm and melody before traditional speech therapy." Eli pulled out a small notebook, its pages dog-eared from use. I was thinking we could start with simple call and response patterns. Like this. He demonstrated a gentle tap-tap-pause rhythm on the pew. Perfect, Dr. Patel said. Non-threatening, predictable patterns help build trust. And trust, Pastor Ruth added with a knowing smile, is what these children need most. They mapped out a plan for listening circles, short sessions where children could join in with simple instruments, humming, or just quiet presence. No pressure, no expectations. The next afternoon, Eli arranged cushions in a small circle near the pediatric wing's play area. He placed egg shakers, soft drums, and rhythm sticks within easy reach. Noah arrived with Marisol, clutching his truck as always. "Welcome, amigo," Eli said softly. "Want to sit anywhere you like?" Noah chose a blue cushion, setting his truck carefully beside him. 2 other children from the pediatric ward joined them, a girl with an IV pole and a boy wearing superhero pajamas. "We're just going to play a little game," Eli explained, keeping his voice gentle. He started a simple rhythm on his drum. Tap, tap, rest. Tap, tap, rest. The girl with the IV picked up an egg shaker, following his pattern. The boy in pajamas grinned and grabbed rhythm sticks. Noah watched, his dark eyes intent on the movements. "No wrong way to join in," Eli assured them. "Just listen and play however you feel." Dr. Patel observed from the doorway, making quiet notes. When Noah finally reached for a small drum, she gave Eli an encouraging nod. They played for 15 minutes, the simple rhythms growing more complex as the children gained confidence. Noah remained silent but engaged, his small hands finding the beat. Vivian appeared near the end of the session, her heels clicking on the tile floor. She stood at a distance, arms crossed, but her eyes never left Noah. "Wonderful job today," Eli told the group. "Same time tomorrow?" The other children nodded eagerly. Noah carefully replaced his drum and picked up his truck, but then he paused. His gaze moved from Vivian to Marisol, who stood nearby with a tender expression. "Ma, Ma," he whispered, so soft they almost missed it. Marisol's hand flew to her heart. Vivian's carefully controlled expression cracked, just for a moment, before she smoothed it away. "Time to go, Noah," she said, but her voice was gentler than usual. After the children left, Eli cleaned up while humming an old hymn. Dr. Patel helped stack the cushions. "This is good work, Eli," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you different." He nodded, thinking of Noah's whispered word and the look that passed between Vivian and Marisol. Sometimes healing comes in unexpected ways. Later that night, as Eli locked the supply closet and shouldered his bag, he heard it, a small laugh floating down the empty hallway. Noah's laugh, bright and clear as a bell. He smiled, switched off the lights, and headed home with hope in his heart. The laughter echoed behind him, a reminder that even the smallest breakthroughs could light up the darkest corners. Eli walked into the staff break room early Monday morning, his thermos of coffee warming his hands. The familiar scent of burnt coffee and bleach filled the air. 2 nurses huddled by the vending machine, their voices carrying across the quiet room. "Can you believe it? The janitor thinks he's some kind of child whisperer now," the first nurse said, stirring creamer into her cup. "Playing daddy to the CEO's kid," the second nurse scoffed. "Know your place, right?" Eli's hand tightened around his thermos, but he kept his movements steady as he walked to the coffee station. The nurses lowered their voices, but continued. "I heard the boy's real father is that donor, Graham Grayson. Blue blood through and through." "Well, not entirely blue," the first nurse said with a meaningful look. "That housekeeper's daughter." "Exactly. No wonder Miss Chen keeps him hidden away, probably embarrassed." The break room door swung open as Dr. Patel walked in. The nurses scattered, leaving their half-empty cups behind. Eli stood at the counter, his coffee forgotten. "You okay?" Dr. Patel asked quietly. "I'm fine," Eli said, but his jaw was tight. He pulled out his phone and opened the hospital's community forum. The comments under the recent donor event post made his stomach turn. "Money talks, but blood is thicker. Graham Grayson deserves to know his son. What kind of mother keeps a child from his real family? That housekeeper probably put ideas in the kid's head. These people always want a piece of the pie. Eli closed the app, his appetite gone. Throughout the morning he noticed the sideways glances, the whispers that followed him down the halls. Even some of the regular staff who used to greet him warmly now looked away. At the afternoon staff meeting, Head of Security Jim Martinez brought up recent concerns about unauthorized interactions with patients. Though he didn't name names, several people glanced at Eli. Eli stood up, his voice calm but firm. If anyone has specific concerns about the supervised music therapy sessions, which were approved by both Dr. Patel and Ms. Chen, I'm happy to address them directly. The room fell silent. Marisol, who sat in the back row, lifted her chin slightly. These sessions help children feel safe, Eli continued. That's not overstepping, it's being human. And if anyone has questions about Noah's heritage or family situation, I suggest they take those questions to Ms. Chen directly instead of spreading rumors. Jim shifted uncomfortably. No one's questioning the program officially, Brooks. Just maintaining professional boundaries. Professional boundaries don't mean we ignore a child in distress, Eli said. Or judge their family. After the meeting, Marisol caught up with Eli in the hallway. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Thank you, she said softly. Camila, she would have been proud to see someone stand up for her son like that. Eli nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Noah's lucky to have you and Miss Chen. And you, Marisol added, no matter what they say. Later that night, after most of the staff had gone home, Eli saw Vivian through Noah's partially open door. She stood beside his bed, perfectly still in her designer suit, watching him sleep. Her hand hovered above his dark curls, trembling slightly but never made contact. The distance between them seemed both vast and paper-thin, like a sheet of glass that protected and separated at the same time. Eli quietly moved past the door, leaving mother and son to their private moment, the sound of his mop against the floor, a steady rhythm in the quiet hallway. The middle. The cafeteria was almost empty when Eli walked in at 6:30 the next morning. Dawn light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. In the far corner, Vivian Chen sat alone at a small table, her untouched coffee growing cold beside her laptop. Eli hesitated, then grabbed his usual morning apple from the fruit basket. He noticed the dark circles under Vivian's eyes as he passed her table. Mind if I join you? He asked softly. Vivian looked up, startled. For a moment, her face showed raw exhaustion before her usual mask slipped back into place. She gestured to the empty chair. You're here early, Eli said, taking a seat. Never left. Vivian pushed her coffee aside. Been reading comments online all night. Amazing how cruel people can be from behind a keyboard. I saw some of those comments, Eli said. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm used to it. She straightened her blazer. In tech, being a woman of color in charge means growing thick skin. Doesn't make it right. Vivian's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. When I first adopted Noah, everyone had an opinion. Too busy, too cold, too focused on work. She looked out the window. They weren't entirely wrong. You were protecting him, Eli said. Was I? Vivian's voice cracked slightly. Or was I just doing what I always do? Building walls. The morning light caught the tears she was fighting back. Eli reached for a napkin and slid it across the table. She took it without looking at him. You know what the worst part is? Vivian continued. Every time I let my guard down, something happens. Camila trusted Graham. And look how that ended. I trusted the board would support Noah's privacy. But here we are. So you keep everyone at arm's length, Eli said quietly. Warmth invites danger, Vivian replied. Power keeps us safe. Eli thought of his late wife, of the music they'd shared, of holding Lena through grief. No, he said gently. Warmth is safety. It's what gives us strength to face the hard times. Vivian met his eyes then, really looking at him for the first time. Something shifted in her expression. A crack in the armor. Noah whispers to you, she said. He laughs in your listening circles. I watch sometimes, from the hallway. He whispers to you, too. I've seen him reach for your hand. And I freeze, Vivian admitted. Every single time. But you stay, Eli said. That matters more than you think. They sat in comfortable silence as the cafeteria slowly filled with early shift workers. Sunlight crept across their table, warming the forgotten coffee cups. Later that afternoon, during the listening circle, Noah sat cross-legged on the floor next to Eli's chair. They tapped out simple rhythms while Dr. Patel observed from nearby. "Truck goes vroom," Noah whispered, pushing his toy across the carpet. Eli kept tapping steadily. "What color is your truck?" "Red," came the soft reply. Then unprompted, "Like Mama's flowers." Dr. Patel's pencil paused mid-note. Noah had never strung so many words together before. "The ones in her office?" Eli asked, keeping his voice casual while his heart soared. Noah nodded. "She likes them, but doesn't smile." "Sometimes people forget how to smile," Eli said gently, "but they remember when they're ready." Noah considered this, still rolling his truck. "You smile lots," he whispered. "Like sunshine." Dr. Patel wiped her eyes quickly, pretending to adjust her glasses. Even the other children in the circle had gone quiet, watching Noah with wonder. At 5 o'clock, Eli gathered his cleaning supplies, his mind still on Noah's breakthrough. As he walked toward the service elevator, he glanced up at the second-floor boardroom. Vivian stood at the window, watching him. When their eyes met, her usual stern expression had softened into something almost like hope. For just a moment, she raised her hand in a small wave. Eli waved back, thinking of their conversation that morning. Maybe she was right about danger and warmth, but maybe he was right too. Maybe they were both learning something new about safety. Friday afternoon brought a gentle buzz to St. Luke's pediatric wing. Eli pushed his cart down the freshly mopped hallway, arranging folding chairs along the walls. The wide corridor near the children's ward had excellent acoustics, something he'd noticed during his late-night cleaning shifts. "Dad, you're overthinking the chair placement," Lena said, adjusting her guitar strap. She wore her favorite purple sweater, the one her mom had given her before passing. "It's not Carnegie Hall." "Every concert hall deserves respect, even if it's just a hospital hallway." Eli straightened another chair, then stepped back to survey his work. Nurses and staff members began trickling in with their families. Dr. Patel arrived, pushing young Tommy in his wheelchair, his IV pole decorated with superhero stickers. More children emerged from their rooms, some walking slowly, others carried by parents. The air hummed with quiet excitement. Marisol appeared, with Noah clutching her hand. The boy wore a crisp blue button-down shirt and his favorite truck-pattern socks. His eyes widened at the small crowd, and he pressed closer to Marisol's side. "It's okay, Myho," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "Remember what we practiced?" Eli caught Noah's eye and gave him a gentle nod. The boy's shoulders relaxed slightly. Lena settled onto a stool and began softly strumming her guitar. The melody floated down the hallway, simple, warm, inviting. Eli started a steady rhythm by tapping his palm against his leg. "Everyone can join in however they like," he announced to the gathering crowd. "Tap your feet, clap your hands, hum along. Music belongs to all of us." Tommy started tapping his hand against his wheelchair arm. A little girl in pink pajamas swayed back and forth. Soon the hallway filled with a tapestry of gentle sounds. Fingers drumming on chairbacks, feet shuffling against linoleum, quiet humming. Eli noticed Vivian standing at the edge of the crowd, phone nowhere in sight. She wore a simple gray sweater instead of her usual blazer, and her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders. Something in her stance seemed softer, less guarded. As Lena's guitar wrapped around them, Eli began humming the melody of "Amazing Grace." The familiar tune spread through the crowd like a warm current. Parents squeezed children's hands. Nurses swayed. Even Dr. Patel closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her face. Noah stood very still, his gaze fixed on Eli. His small fingers tapped against his leg in perfect time with the music. Then, so quietly, it was almost lost in the melody, his lips began to move. Amazing. The word floated out like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon. Grace. The crowd fell silent. Even Lena's guitar gentled to the barest whisper of strings. Noah's voice grew slightly stronger. How sweet the sound. Eli kept humming, steady and encouraging, as tears pricked his eyes. He saw Marisol press a hand to her heart. Dr. Patel gripped her clipboard, nodding in triumph. And Vivian, powerful, controlled Vivian, stepped forward through the crowd. Tears streamed freely down her face, but she was smiling. Really smiling, the kind that crinkled her eyes and softened every sharp edge. She knelt beside Noah and wrapped her arms around him. The boy turned into her embrace, pressing his face against her sweater. "Mama," he whispered, clear as a bell. Lena's guitar swelled again, and the hallway filled with gentle applause. Tommy whooped from his wheelchair. The little girl in pink pajamas twirled in circles. After the impromptu concert, as families drifted back to rooms and nurses returned to stations, Eli packed up the folding chairs. His heart felt so full it might burst. "That was pretty amazing, Dad," Lena said, carefully placing her guitar in its case. "You played beautifully, sweetheart." He pulled her into a quick hug. "Your mom would have been so proud." They walked home together under the golden streetlights, their footsteps in perfect rhythm. Lena hummed snatches of melody while Eli carried her guitar case, both still floating on the magic of the evening. Monday morning arrived with steel-gray clouds hanging low over St. Luke's. Vivian Chen's heels clicked against the polished floor as she made her way to the executive boardroom. Her navy suit was perfectly pressed, her expression carefully neutral. But beneath that practiced calm, her heart raced. Through the glass walls, she could see them waiting. 12 board members in expensive suits, their faces a mix of concern and calculation. And there, at the head of the table, sat Graham Grayson, looking every bit the caring philanthropist in his tailored gray suit. "Ms. Chen," Dr. Richardson, the board president, gestured to the empty chair. "Thank you for joining us on short notice." Vivian took her seat, noting how the morning light caught the fresh flowers Graham had likely ordered for the meeting. Everything was orchestrated, down to the leather portfolios placed at each setting. "We've received a remarkable proposal, Dr. and," Richardson continued, sliding a document across the table.
"Mr. Grayson has offered a $20 million endowment for our pediatric wing."
Vivian's fingers tensed around the paper, but her voice remained steady. "How generous." Graham leaned forward, his smile practiced and warm. "I believe in giving back to the community, especially now that I know my connection to it runs deeper than I realized." The implications hung heavy in the air. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "The Grayson Children's Wing," Dr. Richardson said, "would transform our pediatric services, new equipment, expanded programs. And, of course," Graham added smoothly, "it would provide a framework for more family-centered care." Vivian met his gaze. The threat was clear. This wasn't just about naming rights. This was about Noah. By afternoon, the story had broken. Local news websites ran headlines like, "Tech CEO blocks father's hospital gift," and "Millionaire philanthropist fights for son's future." Social media exploded with opinions, most of them cruel. Vivian stood in her office, scanning the coverage on her tablet. One article particularly stung: "Silicon Valley executive keeps child from working-class roots." The piece painted her as an elitist who had swept in with her money to save Noah from his heritage, while Graham was portrayed as a reformed man seeking redemption. A knock at her door made her look up. It was Marisol, her face drawn with worry. "Have you seen what they're saying?" Marisol asked softly. Vivian nodded. "They're turning it into a circus." "They don't know Camila's story. They don't know what really happened." "And they never will," Vivian said firmly. "I promise to protect that privacy." Meanwhile, in the hospital cafeteria, Eli couldn't escape the whispers. Staff members who'd never given him a second glance now stared openly. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from local reporters asking about the janitor who helped the troubled boy speak. "Mr. Brooks?" A young nurse hurried up to his cart.
"Is it true you're starting a music therapy program?"
"I'm just doing my job," Eli said quietly, continuing to wipe down tables. "But everyone's talking about how you helped that little boy. And now, with all this drama about his real father." Eli cut her off gently. "I need to finish my rounds." He pushed his cart toward the supply closet, trying to ignore the looks and whispers. Opening his locker to grab fresh cleaning supplies, a white envelope fell to the floor. Inside was a typed note, stark and simple: "Stay out of things that aren't your business." The paper crinkled in his grip as his eyes scanned the sterile warning again. The friendly environment he'd known for years suddenly felt hostile, filled with hidden agendas and invisible lines he wasn't supposed to cross. A text notification lit up his phone. Another reporter asking for comment about the heartwarming story of a janitor's special connection with a troubled child. Below it was a link to a new article. Hospital Hero, the janitor who gave a boy his voice. Eli closed his locker quietly, tucked the threatening note into his pocket, and picked up his mop. The floors still needed cleaning, regardless of the storm brewing around him. But as he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was now caught in the middle of something much bigger than himself, a battle between power and compassion, between public image and private truth. Through the window of her office, Vivian watched him work, her reflection ghosted in the glass. She held her phone, opened to Graham's latest press statement about healing family wounds and building bridges for the future. Her other hand pressed against the cool window, as if she could reach through it and protect everyone she cared about from the gathering storm. The boardroom's mahogany table gleamed under fluorescent lights as Dr. Richardson cleared his throat. After careful consideration of recent events, the board has decided to temporarily suspend the unofficial music sessions conducted by maintenance staff member Eli Brooks. Vivian's fingers tightened around her leather portfolio. She'd known this was coming, had seen the writing on the wall in careful memos and worried glances. Still, the words landed like stones in her stomach. "This is purely a precautionary measure," Dr. Watson added, adjusting her glasses, "until proper protocols can be established and liability concerns addressed." The words liability concerns echoed off the glass walls. Vivian watched Graham's slight smile, the satisfied tilt of his head. He'd won this round without saying a word. That afternoon, Eli received the news from his supervisor, a wrinkled memo printed on hospital letterhead. He folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket, then went back to mopping the pediatric wing floor. The usual warmth of the children's artwork on the walls seemed dimmer somehow. Noah's regressions started slowly, then all at once. By Wednesday, he'd stopped responding to questions with even the smallest whispers. His shoulders hunched forward when anyone approached, like a turtle retreating into its shell. During lunch, he pushed his food around the plate without taking a single bite, his toy truck abandoned beside his milk carton. Marisol watched it happen with growing dread in her eyes. She'd seen this before. Powerful men making decisions that rippled through lives like poison. During her breaks, she lit candles in the hospital chapel, murmuring prayers in Spanish. "Not again," she whispered to the flickering flames. "Por favor, not again." The corridors felt emptier without the soft tapping of rhythm games or the gentle hum of lullabies. Eli's mop made wet trails across the tiles, the squeak of his bucket wheels the only music left. Sometimes he caught himself starting to hum, then stopped, remembering the memo in his pocket. When Vivian passed him in the halls now, her heels clicked faster, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She held her phone like a shield, speaking rapid fire into it about meetings and metrics and market shares. The warm moment they'd shared over coffee might never have happened. The pediatric ward grew quieter too. Children who'd begun joining Noah's listening circles went back to their rooms, back to their tablets and TV shows. Dr. Patel's office door stayed closed more often, the cheerful music notes she'd taped up slowly peeling at the corners. Eli worked later shifts now, volunteering for the quiet hours when the hospital settled into its nighttime rhythm. He liked the peace of it, even if it felt heavy sometimes. The moon cast long shadows through the windows as he worked his way through each floor, each silent room. One evening, he pushed his cart past the cafeteria and saw a small figure huddled at one of the big round tables. Noah sat alone, a bowl of soup growing cold in front of him. His dark eyes stared into the untouched broth as if it held answers to questions no 6-year-old should have to ask. Eli's heart squeezed in his chest. He wanted to go to the boy, to start that gentle tapping that had first broken through the silence. His hand actually lifted, already finding the rhythm. But Noah must have sensed his presence. The boy's head turned slightly, then deliberately away. His small shoulders stiffened, blocking out the world. A clean rejection, heartbreaking in its simplicity. Eli stood for a moment longer, watching the light reflect off Noah's untouched spoon. Then he gripped his mop handle tighter and moved on, leaving only wet footprints behind. Snowflakes drifted past the hospital's tall windows as workers transformed the ballroom for the winter fundraising gala. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white-clothed tables, while a string quartet tuned their instruments in the corner. The air smelled of fresh flowers and polished wood. Eli wheeled his cart through the kitchen's back entrance, now wearing a borrowed black vest over his usual uniform shirt. The catering manager had insisted all staff match the evening's elegance. He kept his head down, focusing on restocking water pitchers and straightening chair covers while reporters set up their cameras near the podium. Remember, quiet and efficient, his supervisor had warned. No drawing attention to yourself tonight. The guests began arriving at 7, filling the room with the rustle of silk dresses and murmur of important conversations. Eli glimpsed Vivian through the crowd, wearing a silver gown that matched her stern expression. She moved between donor groups with practiced grace, but her smile never reached her eyes.
"Mrs. Chen,"
called out a reporter holding up his phone.
"A comment about tonight's announcement?"
Vivian turned away, touching her pearl necklace, a nervous gesture Eli had noticed before. She hadn't spoken to him in days, not since the board's decision. The silence felt heavier than any words could have been. Near the dessert table, Eli overheard snippets of gossip. "Did you see the press release about Graham's gift? Largest donation in St. Luke's history. About time someone put that tech woman in her place." He gripped his serving tray tighter, forcing himself to keep moving. The string quartet launched into Pachelbel's Canon as more guests arrived. Through the kitchen doors, Eli spotted Noah sitting quietly in a corner, wearing a tiny suit while Marisol adjusted his tie. The boy's eyes were wide, taking in the overwhelming scene. At 8 o'clock sharp, Graham Grayson made his entrance. His tailored tuxedo probably cost more than Eli made in a year. Camera flashes sparked as Graham worked the room, shaking hands and laughing at jokes only he could hear. He looked exactly like his PR photos. Perfectly styled gray hair, practiced smile, an air of easy authority that came from never being told no. "Ladies and gentlemen," the hospital board chairman tapped his glass, "if I could have your attention." Eli used the speech as cover to slip closer to Noah's corner, worried about how the boy was handling the noise and crowd. But Marisol shook her head slightly. "Stay back," her expression warned. "Don't make waves. Not tonight." Graham took the podium, adjusting the microphone with manicured fingers. "Thank you all for coming this evening. As many of you know, St. Luke's holds a very special place in my heart." His voice dripped sincerity like honey, spinning a story about family legacy and giving back to the community. He never directly mentioned Noah, but his pointed looks toward Vivian made his meaning clear. The reporters scribbled frantically. "Therefore, I am honored to announce an unprecedented $50 million endowment." Applause erupted. Eli watched Vivian's face, saw her perfect mask crack for just a moment before she schooled her features back to polite attention. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles showed white. "This gift will establish the Grayson Center for Children's Health," Graham continued, "ensuring that every child who comes through these doors receives the very best care, regardless of their background or circumstances." More applause, more camera flashes. Eli noticed Noah shrinking further into his chair, small hands pressed against his ears. The boy's eyes darted between Vivian and Graham, confusion clear on his face. After the speech, Graham made his way through the crowd toward Vivian. She stood her ground, champagne glass untouched in her hand. Eli busied himself collecting empty plates nearby, straining to hear their conversation. "Quite a turnout," Graham said smoothly. "The press seems very interested in our little hospital's future." "The hospital's future was secure without your interference," Vivian replied, voice low and sharp as a blade. "Now, Vivian, is that any way to discuss such a generous gift?" Graham's smile didn't waver. "Speaking of gifts, my lawyers have prepared some documents I think you'll want to review regarding Noah's future care and custody arrangements. This is neither the time nor place." "On the contrary," Graham leaned closer, "this is the perfect time to consider what's best for everyone. Your position here, the hospital's reputation, Noah's need for a father figure. Vivian's face went absolutely still, like frost spreading across a window. Around them, guests mingled and laughed, oblivious to the quiet battle being waged in their midst. The string quartet launched into another elegant piece. Eli glanced toward Noah's corner, wanting to check on the boy, but the chair was empty. Marisol was speaking urgently with a security guard near the door, gesturing toward the hallway. In the commotion of speeches and photographs, Noah had slipped away unnoticed. The string quartet's music faltered, as Vivian's voice cut through the chatter. "Where's Noah?" Her heels clicked rapidly across the ballroom floor. "Has anyone seen my son?" Security guards touched their earpieces, speaking in hushed tones. Marisol emerged from the crowd, wringing her hands in her dark uniform dress.
He was just here, by the dessert table. I only turned away for a moment to get him water.
Vivian's composed mask cracked. "Search every floor, now." Her command sent staff scattering in all directions. Eli set down his serving tray and slipped away from the gala's glittering chaos. He knew Noah better than the security teams did, knew how the boys sought quiet when overwhelmed. The chapel would be empty this late, its shadows a perfect hiding place. The hospital corridors stretched dark and silent, emergency lights casting long shadows. Eli's footsteps echoed as he approached the chapel's heavy wooden doors. Inside, moonlight filtered through stained glass, painting colored patterns on the floor. "Noah?" he called softly.
"It's just me,
"Mr. Eli." A tiny sniffle came from behind the last pew. Eli moved slowly, hands visible, until he spotted a small shape curled tight against the wall. Noah had his face pressed to his knees, his little suit jacket rumpled.
"Hey, buddy."
Eli knelt at a careful distance. "This is a good quiet spot you found." Noah didn't look up or make a sound. His shoulders trembled slightly. Eli started their familiar rhythm, tapping gently on the wooden pew. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap, pause. The pattern that usually drew Noah out stayed unanswered. "Would you like to hear our song?" Eli hummed the first notes of Amazing Grace, the melody that had sparked Noah's breakthrough. Still nothing. Quick footsteps approached outside. Vivian appeared in the doorway, her silver gown catching the moonlight. Her face, usually so controlled, showed raw fear. "Noah!" Her voice cracked as she hurried forward. Eli held up a hand, speaking low. "He's safe, but he's not responding right now, even to our usual signals." Vivian kicked off her heels and knelt on the chapel floor, designer dress pooling around her. "Baby, I'm here." She reached toward Noah, but stopped short of touching him, remembering past panics.
"Mama's right here."
Noah curled tighter, making himself smaller. The chapel's peace shattered as voices approached. The sharp questions of reporters, the heavy steps of security. Camera lights flickered through the stained glass. "Mrs. Chen, is it true your son ran away during the gala? Any comment on Graham Grayson's custody petition? What about the allegations?" The voices grew louder, pressing against the chapel doors. Inside, the air grew thick with tension. Noah pressed his hands over his ears. Vivian's shoulders stiffened at the noise, but she stayed kneeling by her son. Her perfectly styled hair fell forward as she bowed her head, hiding her face from the windows. In the colored shadows, mother and child remained frozen, neither touching nor speaking, while the world clamored outside. Eli stood guard near the door, his presence a quiet barrier between the small family and the growing crowd. The chapel bells tolled 9, their deep resonance almost drowning out the persistent questions and camera clicks beyond the walls. The end. The chapel doors creaked open, letting in a shaft of harsh fluorescent light from the hallway. Camera flashes flickered through the gap as Marisol pushed her way inside, her gray-streaked hair coming loose from its neat bun. She clutched something small and glinting in her weathered hands. Noah remained curled in the corner behind the last pew, his small form barely visible in the shadows. Eli stood a respectful distance away, while Vivian hovered near the altar, her silver gown catching the colored light from the stained glass windows. Marisol's sensible shoes made soft sounds on the wooden floor as she approached Noah. Her face, usually so practical and composed, was tender with an old grief. In her hands, a delicate rosary of worn wooden beads caught the moonlight. Mi pequeño, she said softly, kneeling despite her stiff joints. I have something to tell you about your mama. Your first mama, Camila. Noah didn't move, but his breathing changed slightly, listening. She was my daughter, and she was so brave. Marisol's voice grew thick with memory. Every night, when she worked her shift at the hospital, she would sing. Such a beautiful voice, like an angel. The patients loved her lullabies. The chapel's silence seemed to deepen, holding space for her words. Even the distant camera clicks faded away. She would sing while she changed beds and brought water to the sick, sometimes in Spanish, sometimes in English, but always with so much love. Marisol's fingers traced the rosary beads. This was hers. She held it every night before work, praying for strength to help others. Eli shifted his weight, and the floorboard beneath him creaked. Noah flinched at the sound, but Marisol kept speaking, her voice steady and warm. One night, very late, she sang to a frightened little girl who couldn't sleep. The girl's mother was so touched, she cried. Your voice is healing, she told Camila. Marisol smiled through her own tears. That's what your mama was, a healer in her own way, just like you have healing in your heart. She held out the rosary, its beads gleaming softly. She would want you to have this now, mi amor, to remember that brave hearts can be quiet hearts too. Noah's small hand uncurled slightly from where it clutched his knees. Marisol gently placed the rosary in his palm, closing his fingers around it. Eli moved carefully to the nearest pew, beginning a gentle tap-tap rhythm on the polished wood. The sound was familiar now, their special language of comfort. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. Like a heartbeat. Vivian stood frozen by the altar, watching. Then, slowly, deliberately, she reached for her ever-present phone, her shield against vulnerability, her tool of control. With trembling fingers, she set it down on the floor, the screen dark and silent. The gesture spoke louder than words. She took one step toward her son, then another, her expensive heels discarded somewhere behind her. When she knelt beside Marisol, her designer gown pooled around her like spilled moonlight. Together they waited, the housekeeper who had lost a daughter, the mother trying to lay down her armor, and the janitor whose music spoke when words failed. Noah's fingers moved over the rosary beads, learning their shapes in the dark. Eli's tapping continued, soft and steady. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. Like a lullaby without melody. Then, almost too quiet to hear, a small sound emerged from Noah's throat, not quite a word, but an echo of his mother's song, carried through years of love and loss to this moonlit moment. In the hushed chapel, Marisol knelt beside Noah, her knees creaking against the worn carpet. The rosary's wooden beads clicked softly as she held them out, each one polished smooth from years of prayers. Mi amor, she whispered. Your mama Camila held these every night while singing to you. Noah's eyes fixed on the swaying beads, his small fingers uncurled from their tight fist, reaching out to touch them. The gentle tap-tap of Eli's rhythm on the pew created a heartbeat in the sacred space. Vivian took a shaky breath and lowered herself to the floor, her expensive gown pooling around her. The phone she always carried like a shield clattered softly as she set it aside. The gesture seemed to crack something open in the air between them. The silence stretched, broken only by the muffled whispers of reporters outside and Eli's steady tapping. Noah's chest rose and fell more slowly now, his breathing finding the rhythm. His other hand stayed wrapped around the toy truck, holding both pieces of his story, past and present. A tear slipped down Marisol's cheek as she hummed the first notes of an old Spanish lullaby. The melody floated through the chapel like incense, wrapping around them all. Noah's lips trembled. Mama! The word came out barely above a whisper, but in the chapel's hush it rang like a bell. Stay. Vivian's breath caught. Marisol's humming faltered. Eli's tapping paused for just a heartbeat before resuming its gentle rhythm. Noah uncurled himself slowly, like a flower opening to the sun. His eyes, dark and serious, moved from face to face. Marisol, who had given him his first mother's memories. Vivian, who had chosen him as her son. Eli, who had helped him find his voice again. His small arms reached out, first toward Marisol and Vivian. Both women moved forward as if pulled by invisible strings, gathering him between them. Noah's hand still clutched the rosary, pressing it against Vivian's silk-covered shoulder as she held him close. Then Noah turned slightly, extending one arm toward Eli, who still knelt by the pew. The invitation was clear. Eli moved closer, adding his steady presence to their circle. Through the chapel's stained glass windows, camera flashes had been creating a strange, artificial lightning. But now, one by one, they dimmed and died away. The reporters outside lowered their cameras, perhaps finally sensing the sanctity of the moment they were witnessing. Vivian pressed her face into Noah's hair, no longer trying to hide her tears. They soaked into his dark curls as she rocked him gently. Her shoulders shook with 6 years of held-back emotion, fear, love, fierce protectiveness, all breaking free at once. Noah patted her cheek with the hand that held the rosary, the beads cool against her skin.
"Mama,"
he said again, stronger this time. Then he reached up to touch Marisol's face too. "Abuela." His voice was soft but clear, like rain on quiet waters. The word made Marisol gasp. She covered his small hand with her own, pressing it to her weathered cheek. Years of careful distance crumbled as she let herself be what she had always felt, his grandmother, keeper of his first mother's memory. Eli maintained his gentle tapping, providing the steady heartbeat that held their moment together. Noah leaned his head against Vivian's shoulder, but kept his other hand stretched toward Eli, fingers moving in time with the rhythm. Through the windows, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, their shadows dancing across the chapel floor. The flakes grew thicker, muffling the world outside until it seemed they were in their own pocket of time, held safe in the chapel's embrace. Noah's breathing deepened, finding peace in the circle of his chosen family. The rosary beads caught the colored light from the windows, throwing tiny rainbows across their joined hands. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in quiet, white. The ballroom's crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the crowd as Vivian Chen walked toward the stage, Noah secure in her arms. Her silver gown caught the light, but gone was the earlier frost in her bearing. Her son's head rested against her shoulder, his small hand still clutching Camila's rosary. The microphone gave a slight whine as she adjusted it. Camera phones rose like fireflies in the darkness. Vivian took a deep breath, her usual polish replaced by something raw and real. 6 years ago, she began, her voice steady but gentler than anyone had ever heard it. A young woman named Camila Rivera worked nights at this hospital. She mopped these same floors, changed beds, and sang lullabies to fussy patients when she thought no one was listening. Noah shifted in her arms, his eyes tracking the wooden beads he held. In the front row, Marisol dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Camila was more than a job title. She was a daughter who made her mother proud, a friend who never failed to share her lunch, a mother who sang to her unborn child during every shift. Vivian's voice caught. And she was brave enough to stand up to powerful men who thought money could buy silence. Graham Grayson shifted in his seat, his polished veneer cracking. When Camila died, I made a promise, not just to protect her son, but to protect her truth. Tonight, Mr. Grayson has offered this hospital a generous naming gift, but names matter. Stories matter. Truth matters. The crowd stirred. Board members exchanged worried glances. Vivian stood straighter. I am declining Mr. Grayson's gift. Instead, I am establishing the Camila Rivera Music Speech Fund with an initial endowment from my personal accounts. This fund will support music therapy, speech programs, and fair wages for our essential workers. It will belong not to one wealthy donor, but to this entire community. A murmur rippled through the room. Noah raised his head, looking at his mother with clear eyes. We've all witnessed the power of music here. A janitor with a mop handle and a hymn helped my son find his voice. Because Eli Brooks saw Noah not as a problem to solve, but as a child worthy of patience and respect. In the back of the room, Eli stood quietly next to his cleaning cart, his usual uniform replaced by a modest, dark suit. His daughter Lena squeezed his hand. This fund honors Camila's love of music and her belief that every voice deserves to be heard. It will ensure that no worker faces the choice between dignity and survival. No child's therapy will depend on their parents' status, and no one's story will be buried under marble plaques and PR statements. Vivian kissed Noah's forehead, then looked directly at Graham. Mr. Grayson, you're welcome to donate anonymously to this fund. But Noah's story, Camila's story, belongs to those who lived it. No amount of money can change that truth. The silence held for one breathless moment. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the crowd, a single person began to clap. The applause spread like ripples on water, building until the entire ballroom was on its feet. Noah whispered something in Vivian's ear. She smiled, tears gleaming in her eyes, and nodded. Together, they began to hum, the same lullaby Camila had once sung in these halls. Marisol's voice joined them, then others, until the simple melody filled the space between marble floors and crystal lights. At the back of the room, Eli watched it all. His hands, rough from years of work, were steady on his cart handle. Pride swelled in his chest, not for himself, but for the brave woman on stage, for the boy finding his voice, for the truth finally breaking free. This wasn't his story to tell, but he was honored to have played his small part in it. The applause continued, a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of St. Luke's. Vivian stood tall, her arms secure around Noah, as camera flashes captured the moment when power bowed to truth, and silence gave way to song. The winter sun cast long shadows through Vivian's office window at St. Luke's. She sat behind her desk, straight-backed but less rigid than before, reviewing the final paperwork for the Camila Rivera Music Speech Fund. A soft knock made her look up. Graham Grayson stood in the doorway, his usual polished appearance slightly rumpled. His cashmere coat hung loose, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He cleared his throat. "May I come in?" Vivian nodded once, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. The leather creaked as Graham lowered himself into it. "You look tired," she observed, neither kind nor cruel. "I haven't been sleeping well." He ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "The press has been persistent. They usually are when they smell blood in the water." Graham winced but didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he placed it on her desk. "It's all here," he said quietly. "The legal documents relinquishing any claim to Noah. A private donation to the fund. No strings, no naming rights, and—" He paused, swallowing hard. "A written acknowledgement of what I did to Camila. The pressure I put on her. The NDA. Everything." Vivian didn't reach for the envelope immediately. "Why now?" "Because you were right." His voice cracked. "I was a coward. When Camila told me she was pregnant, I panicked. My reputation, my position on the board. I chose to protect those things instead of doing what was right." He looked down at his hands. "I threw money at the problem and made her disappear." The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the windows. "She was 19, Vivian said softly, steel beneath the quiet. "A teenager working night shifts to help her mother. You were 42 and on the hospital board." "I know." Graham's shoulders sagged. "I told myself it was mutual, that the settlement was generous. But I always knew, it was wrong." Vivian finally picked up the envelope, examining its contents. The legal language was clear and absolute. Full termination of parental rights. No future claims possible. The check was substantial, with no conditions attached. The confession was detailed and self-damning. "Noah deserves better," Graham continued. "Better than a father who hid from responsibility until it became convenient to claim it. Better than someone who treated his mother like a problem to be solved with a checkbook." "Yes, he does." Vivian's tone was measured. "He has better. He has Marisol's love, carrying her daughter's memory. He has Eli's patience, teaching him to find his voice through music. He has a community that stands with him, not above him." Graham nodded, blinking rapidly.
The way he looks at Eli. That's what a father should be.
Someone who sees the child, not the complications. He stood slowly, straightening his coat.
I won't contest anything.
The press release will confirm my full support of the fund and retract any implications about your fitness as a mother.
Thank you.
Vivian rose as well, professional to the end. Not for the money or the legal surrender, those were owed. But for finally telling the truth. Camila deserved at least that.
Will you?
Graham hesitated at the door.
Will you tell Noah about this someday? Not to excuse anything, but so he knows I finally did one right thing?
When he's older, Vivian replied.
I'll tell him the whole truth.
About Camila's courage, about choices and consequences, about the difference between power and strength. She met his eyes steadily. He'll make his own decisions about forgiveness. Graham nodded one last time. Without another word, he turned and walked out into the corridor. Through her window, Vivian watched him cross the parking lot, shoulders hunched against the biting wind. Snow was starting to fall again, dusting his coat as he disappeared into the gathering dusk. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the hospital boardroom, casting warm rectangles across the polished conference table. Board members shifted in their leather chairs, some avoiding eye contact, others reviewing the documents before them with newfound interest. At the head of the table, Chairman Stevens cleared his throat. After careful consideration of recent events and their impact on our community, he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority tempered by humility, the board has reached several decisions regarding Mr. Brooks's music program. Eli sat quietly between Dr. Patel and Vivian, his hands folded in his lap. The same room that had witnessed his program suspension now held a different energy, one of reconciliation rather than judgment. First, Stevens continued, we vote unanimously to reinstate the Listening Circles program, effective immediately. He paused, glancing around the table. Additionally, Mr. Brooks will receive back pay for the period of suspension, with our sincere apologies for the hasty nature of our previous decision. Dr. Patel reached over and squeezed Eli's arm. He remained still, but his eyes softened with quiet gratitude. Furthermore, Stevens said, shuffling his papers, the board acknowledges our need for significant institutional changes. He nodded to a woman in a crisp blazer at the far end of the table. Mrs. Rodriguez from the Community Healthcare Ethics Committee will oversee a comprehensive anti-discrimination audit of all hospital policies and practices. Ms. Rodriguez stood, her presence commanding attention. This audit will examine everything from hiring practices to patient care protocols. We'll be looking particularly at how we serve our diverse community and ensure equal access to care. Vivian leaned forward slightly. And the timeline for implementation? The audit begins next week, Ms. Rodriguez replied. We expect initial findings within 30 days, with immediate action on any urgent concerns. Dr. Patel raised her hand. If I may? At Stevens's nod, she continued. I'd like to propose expanding the Listening Circles program through community involvement. I've already received calls from local music teachers and therapists wanting to volunteer their time. That's exactly the kind of community engagement we need, Stevens agreed, looking more relaxed than he had in weeks. Mr. Brooks, would you be willing to coordinate these volunteers? Eli cleared his throat. Yes, sir. With proper training and oversight, we could help more children. The meeting continued with discussions of logistics and resources. When it finally concluded, board members approached Eli one by one, offering handshakes and quiet words of support. The same people who had once viewed him with suspicion now saw him differently, not just as a janitor with a gift, but as a valuable member of their healthcare team. Later that afternoon, Eli walked down the familiar corridor to his supply closet, keys jingling in his hand. He'd spent the day in meetings with Dr. Patel, sketching out plans for the expanded program, and now he needed the comfort of his routine, the simple act of preparing for the evening shift. The key turned in the lock, and he pushed open the door. Then he stopped, staring. Where his mop and cleaning supplies usually stood, musical instruments filled the space. A small electronic keyboard rested on a stand against one wall. Guitar cases leaned in the corner. Drums of various sizes were stacked neatly on shelves. Hand percussion instruments, tambourines, shakers, and wooden blocks filled a large basket. A note was taped to the keyboard. "From your St. Luke's family. Music heals. Keep playing." Eli ran his fingers over the keys, remembering his choir director days, the joy of teaching children to find their voices. Now he had a chance to do it again, differently but just as meaningfully. Through the open door, he heard footsteps approaching. Dr. Patel appeared, smiling at his surprise. "The staff took up a collection," she explained. "Everyone wanted to help. Nurses, doctors, maintenance crew, even the cafeteria workers. These aren't just instruments, Eli. They're the community's way of saying they believe in what you're doing." Eli nodded, words momentarily failing him. He picked up a small hand drum, testing its surface with gentle taps. "We're scheduling volunteer orientations for next week," Dr. Patel continued. 20 people have already signed up. The pediatric ward is buzzing with excitement. "It's really happening," Eli said softly, still taking in the transformed space. "Yes, it is," Dr. Patel agreed. "And do you know what the best part is? This time, you're not doing it alone." The pediatric wing's activity room had been transformed. Gone were the rigid chairs and sterile silence, replaced by colorful floor cushions arranged in a wide circle. Afternoon sunlight streamed through windows decorated with paper snowflakes, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Eli Brooks sat cross-legged on a blue cushion, a gentle smile on his face as he watched the children settle into their places. "Remember," he said softly, holding up a small hand drum, "there's no wrong way to make music. Just feel it in your heart." Noah, sitting next to a shy new patient named Tommy, nodded seriously. He'd grown so much in these past weeks, no longer the silent boy clutching his toy truck. Now he held his tambourine with quiet confidence, occasionally glancing at Tommy with encouraging looks. The circle grew as more children filtered in, some walking independently, others assisted by nurses or parents. Each found their spot, claimed an instrument from the collection of drums, shakers, and bells that now filled Eli's formerly sparse supply closet. The instruments themselves told a story of community support, donated by local music shops, churches, and families who believed in the power of rhythm and song. "Let's start with our welcome rhythm," Eli suggested, beginning a simple pattern on his drum. Pat, pat, rest, pat. The children joined in, some precisely, others enthusiastically offbeat, but all participating in their own way. The sound swelled, filling the room with joyful noise. Noah leaned toward Tommy, who hadn't picked up an instrument yet. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice clear though quiet. "Watch me." He demonstrated the rhythm on his tambourine, slowing it down until Tommy's anxious expression softened with interest. From her position near the doorway, Vivian Chen watched the scene unfold. She'd shed her usual blazer, standing in a simple sweater that softened her usual corporate silhouette. Her phone remained in her pocket, a small but significant change from the woman who once conducted business during every spare moment. Tommy reached out tentatively for a small drum. Noah beamed, scooting his cushion closer to share the rhythm. "Like this," he encouraged, tapping slowly. "Hear it?" The circle's energy shifted as children began adding their own flourishes to the basic beat. A girl in a wheelchair shook her maracas with enthusiasm, while a boy with a cast on his arm gentle tapped his good hand against his leg. The cacophony somehow melded into something beautiful, not despite its imperfection, but because of it. Eli guided them through familiar songs, each one carrying special meaning. Amazing Grace had become their unofficial anthem, but they also played This Little Light of Mine and other simple tunes that invited participation. Children who couldn't or wouldn't speak found their voices in rhythm, in movement, in the simple joy of being part of something larger than themselves. A small commotion near the door drew attention as Dr. Patel arrived with another potential participant, a teenage girl fresh from surgery, looking uncertain but curious. Noah immediately waved her over to an empty cushion, offering her a choice of shakers with the natural hospitality of a seasoned host. "Welcome to our circle," he said clearly, each word deliberate but confident. "We make music together." The transformation in Noah struck Vivian anew each time she witnessed these sessions. Her son, once locked in silence, now helped others find their voice. He remained gentle, sensitive to others' needs, but there was a new strength in him, a quiet certainty that reminded her, with a bittersweet pang, of Camila. The session continued with games of call and response, each child taking turns leading a simple pattern for others to follow. When it was Noah's turn, he created a playful rhythm that made Tommy laugh out loud, a bright, unexpected sound that caused several heads to turn in delight. Eli caught Vivian's eye across the room. In that brief exchange of glances, volumes were spoken. Gratitude, respect, and shared joy in Noah's growth. No words were needed. They had moved beyond the careful dance of CEO and employee to something deeper, partners in nurturing not just Noah's voice, but the voices of all these children. The afternoon light began to soften, signaling the session's natural end. As parents and nurses came to collect their children, the room filled with cheerful chatter and the sounds of instruments being carefully packed away. Noah helped Tommy return his drum to the storage cart, then gave him a gentle high five. "Same time tomorrow?" Noah asked, looking between Tommy and Eli with hopeful eyes. Eli nodded, his face warm with pride. "Same time tomorrow, buddy. You did great today. Both of you." Vivian stepped forward from her post by the door, and Noah ran to her with the easy affection that had once seemed impossible. She wrapped him in a hug, pressing a kiss to his forehead without worrying who might see this softer side of the hospital's CEO. As the room cleared, Eli began straightening cushions, his movements unhurried and peaceful. He glanced up to find Vivian still there, Noah's hand in hers. Their eyes met again, and they shared a nod, a simple gesture that acknowledged how far they'd all come and the journey still ahead. Late afternoon, light slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vivian Chen's office, casting long shadows across her pristine desk. The space had always been a testament to minimalist efficiency glass, chrome, and clean lines. But today, scattered papers and colorful design samples softened its usual stark appearance. Eli Brooks sat across from Vivian, his weathered hands carefully arranging draft layouts for the Camila Rivera Fund brochure. His janitor's uniform had been traded for casual business attire, simple blue button-down and khakis, but he wore it with the same humble dignity he brought to every task. "What if we put the mission statement here?" he suggested, pointing to the cover. "Something simple but powerful." Vivian leaned forward, her usual sharp business attire, slightly relaxed jacket draped over her chair, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. "I like that," she said, then hesitated. "But the words need to be just right. This isn't about corporate messaging. This is about Camila's legacy." Marisol appeared in the doorway, carrying a plate of still warm cookies that filled the office with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon. "A little brain food," she said, setting them down. Her eyes softened as she glanced at the draft layouts. Camila would have loved this. She always wanted to help other children. "Thanks, Marisol," Vivian said warmly, the formality between employer and housekeeper having melted into something closer to family. She picked up a cookie, then paused. "These are her recipe, aren't they?" Marisol nodded, dabbing quickly at her eyes. "She learned from her abuela. Said every important meeting needed something sweet to open hearts." Lena Brooks burst in, her backpack still slung over one shoulder, laptop tucked under her arm. "Sorry I'm late." "The design club meeting ran over, but I've got some ideas." She pulled out her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I was thinking about colors that feel warm and welcoming, not corporate. And maybe we could include photos of the music circles?" Eli smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. "Show us what you've got, kiddo." Lena turned her laptop around, revealing a design that made everyone lean in closer. The header featured a subtle musical staff, with notes flowing like a gentle river across the page. The colors were soft but hopeful warm, oranges and blues that reminded Vivian of sunrise. "The font for Camila's name," Vivian said quietly, touching the screen. "It's beautiful." "It's called Grace Notes," Lena explained. "I thought, well, it seemed right." They worked together as the afternoon light slowly shifted to evening gold. Marisol shared stories about Camila that brought both tears and laughter. Each memory helped shape the words they chose, making the brochure feel less like a fundraising tool and more like a love letter to possibility. Eli watched as Vivian typed, backspaced, and retyped the mission statement. Her usual rapid-fire efficiency had given way to thoughtful consideration of each word.
Music bridges silences, she read aloud. Every child deserves a voice.
Perfect, Eli said softly. Simple but true. The first donations had already started coming in modest amounts, from hospital staff, local churches, parents of children in the music circles. A retired music teacher had pledged her stimulus check. A coffee shop downtown had set up a donation jar.
Look at this,
Lena said, scrolling through the online donor comments. A 6th grade class held a bake sale. They raised $300. Vivian stood and walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself. I always thought power came from big money, from being untouchable. She turned back to face them. I was wrong. All these small acts of love, this is real power. The printer hummed to life, producing the first test copy of the brochure. Vivian picked it up carefully, as if holding something precious. Her fingers traced over Camila's name, elegant in the Grace Notes font. Below it was a photo of Noah helping Tommy tap out a rhythm on a drum, both boys smiling. Marisol stepped close, placing a gentle hand on Vivian's shoulder. They stood together, two mothers sown by birth and one by choice united, in carrying forward the legacy of the woman who had loved Noah first. She would be proud, Marisol whispered. Not just of the fund, but of how you've opened your heart. Eli gathered the draft papers, straightening them with careful hands. Lena saved her design files, humming softly the same lullaby that had first helped Noah find his voice. Outside the office windows, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of hope. The brochure lay on Vivian's desk. More than just paper and ink. It was a promise, a bridge, a new kind of power built on small kindnesses and shared music. Vivian's fingers lingered on Camila's name, feeling the slight texture of the printed letters beneath her touch. The first snow of December drifted lazily from pearl gray clouds, dusting St. Luke's Community Hospital's courtyard like powdered sugar. Strings of white lights crisscrossed overhead between bare maple trees, their gentle glow reflecting off the gathering snow. Folding chairs filled the brick-paved space, arranged in a half-circle around a small wooden platform. Eli Brooks adjusted his Tia Christmas gift from Lenond, watched volunteers setting up microphones. His janitor's cart stood in its usual corner, but today it held sheet music instead of cleaning supplies. The familiar weight of his mop handle had been replaced by a conductor's baton tucked in his back pocket. Parents and children bundled in winter coats began filtering into the courtyard. Some carried thermoses of hot chocolate. Others clutched song sheets. Dr. Patel helped arrange the youngest performers in the front row, their small faces bright with excitement beneath woolly hats. Noah Rivera sat between Vivian and Marisol, wearing a new blue winter coat. His small fingers traced patterns on his program while he whispered something that made both women smile. The change in him over these past months showed in his relaxed shoulders and quiet confidence. "Ready for your big moment, buddy?" Eli asked, crouching beside Noah's chair. "Ready," Noah replied softly, but his eyes sparkled. "Did you see my new boots? They're for the snow." "Looking sharp," Eli winked, noting how Vivian's hand rested protectively on Noah's shoulder. Her usual designer suit had been replaced by a casual sweater and jeans mother rather than a CEO today. The hospital board members arrived in a cluster, their usual formality softened by winter scarves and red cheeks from the cold. Even they couldn't maintain their corporate distance, as children darted between chairs, giggling and catching snowflakes on their tongues. Lena appeared with her guitar case, cheeks flushed from hurrying. "Sorry I'm late, Dad. Traffic was crazy with the snow." She hugged him quickly before setting up near the platform. Pastor Ruth stepped forward to open the concert with a brief prayer. Her words floated up with visible breath in the cold air. "Let this music heal hearts and build bridges between us all." The children's choir began with Silent Night, their young voices clear and sweet in the hushed courtyard. Snow continued to fall, catching in hair and eyelashes, melting on warm faces turned up to sing. Parents recorded on phones while grandparents wiped tears. Through each song, Eli conducted with gentle movements, remembering the long journey from that first whispered "Dad" in the hospital lobby. He caught Vivian's eye during Joy to the World and saw her genuine Smolino trace remaining of the Ice Queen who had once ruled these halls with cold efficiency. When it came time for Amazing Grace. Noah stood without prompting. He walked to the microphone, small but steady. The crowd hushed. Marisol clasped her hands as if in prayer. Vivian leaned forward in her chair, tension visible in her shoulders despite her calm expression. Eli gave Noah their special Signal 3 soft taps on his own chest. Noah's clear voice lifted into the snowy air. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. The words that had once been trapped behind silence now flowed like water. Though still soft, his voice carried conviction and joy. Other children joined in, supporting but never overshadowing. Eli's conductor's movements became minimal. This moment belonged to Noah. Vivian pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Marisol wrapped an arm around her shoulders as they watched their boy shine. The snow fell heavier, big fluffy flakes that muffled the world in white, as if nature itself wanted to create a peaceful sanctuary for this moment. Parents swayed gently to the familiar melody. Hospital staff who had gathered at windows wiped their eyes. Even the most hardened board members looked touched. The song drew to a close, Noah's final note fading into the hushed snowfall. For a heartbeat, no one moved or spoke. Then applause erupted, warm and thunderous against the soft backdrop of falling snow. Noah's smile could have lit up the courtyard without any Christmas lights at all. The snow continued its gentle descent, transforming the hospital grounds into a winter wonderland. Each flake caught the glow of the strung lights, creating halos of soft illumination. The world beyond the courtyard disappeared into white, leaving only this moment, these people, this music. The last notes of Amazing Grace still echoed in the snowy courtyard as families began gathering their coats and instruments. Children laughed, creating puffs of white breath in the cold air, while parents chatted and helped pack up chairs. Noah bounced on his toes, his red winter hat slightly askew, as Marisol wrapped a thick scarf around his neck. His eyes sparkled with leftover excitement from the performance, and he hummed softly to himself, a habit that now felt as natural as breathing. "That was amazing, buddy," Eli said, ruffling Noah's hat. "You led that song like a pro." "It was fun," Noah replied, his voice quiet but clear. He reached for Lena's hand. "Can we do it again tomorrow?" Lena laughed, adjusting her guitar case strap. "Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. How about we practice at home first?" Vivian watched this exchange, her elegant wool coat dusted with snowflakes. The rigid set of her shoulders, once her constant companion, had softened. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, as Noah demonstrated his new rhythm pattern to Lena. "Here, let me help with those," Eli said, reaching for the drums that needed to be loaded into Vivian's car. The parking lot lights created halos in the falling snow, and their footsteps left fresh tracks on the white ground. Marisol followed, carrying a box of sheet music. "My bones are telling me we'll have more snow tonight," she said, looking up at the sky. "Good thing we had the concert today." "Abuela knows best," Noah chirped, making Marisol beam at the term of endearment. They walked together through the quiet parking lot, their small procession accompanied by the soft crunch of snow under their feet. Lena and Noah walked ahead, taking turns making up silly songs about snowflakes and winter. "Eli," Vivian said, slowing her pace slightly to fall in step with him. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something." He adjusted his grip on the drums. "Oh?" "The board and I have been discussing the future of the music program." She paused, brushing a snowflake from her sleeve. "We want to make it permanent. A full-time position, with benefits and proper funding." Eli's steps faltered slightly. "That's wonderful news for the hospital." "It's wonderful news for you," Vivian corrected, meeting his eyes. "If you want it, we'd like you to direct the program." Ahead of them, Noah had started teaching Lena a clapping game, their laughter carrying back through the crisp air. "Me?" Eli's voice was quiet. "But I'm just the—" "If you say just the janitor, I might have to throw a snowball at you." Marisol interrupted, her tone warm but firm. "You're the one who helped my grandson find his voice again. There's nothing just about that." Vivian nodded. The position would include developing music therapy programs, coordinating with Dr. Patel, and expanding the community outreach. You'd have a proper office, though. she added with a small smile. I suspect you'll spend more time in the halls making music anyway. They reached Vivian's car, and Eli carefully set down the drums. Noah and Lena were now drawing patterns in the fresh snow nearby, their dark coats contrasting with the white ground. I don't have the right degrees, Eli said softly, but hope had crept into his voice. You have something better? Vivian replied. You have the gift. The rest, the certifications, the training, we'll support you through that. The Camila Rivera Fund will help cover the education costs. Marisol touched his arm. Camila would have loved this, you know. She always said music was the best medicine. Eli watched Noah, who was now teaching Lena the tapping pattern they'd used in their very first interaction. The boy's confidence had grown so much, his gentle spirit now shining through instead of hiding behind silence. When do you need an answer? He asked. Take the weekend to think about it, Vivian said, opening the trunk. But I hope you'll say yes. Noah's not the only one who needs what you can offer. They began loading the instruments, working together in the falling snow. Lena and Noah raced back to help, their cheeks pink from the cold. Dad, look! Lena pointed to where they'd been playing. They'd drawn a giant treble clef in the snow. Very artistic, he laughed, reaching for the last drum. His hand brushed Vivian's as she helped guide it into place, and for a moment, they both held on, connected by more than just the metal rim of a drum. The snow fell faster now, erasing their footprints almost as quickly as they made them. But inside the circle of warmth they'd created, this unlikely family brought together by music and love, nothing felt temporary at all. Noah tugged at Eli's sleeve. Will you be here tomorrow? Eli looked at the hopeful faces around him, his daughter's encouraging smile, Marisol's knowing nod, Vivian's quiet certainty, and Noah's trusting eyes. The answer had probably been there all along, waiting for him to find it, just like the music had been waiting in Noah. Yes, he said, and this time he was answering more than just Noah's question. Yes, I'll be here. A week had passed since the courtyard concert, and Eli Brooks stood in his old supply closet, now transformed into a makeshift music storage room. Shelves that once held cleaning supplies now displayed tambourines, small drums, and other percussion instruments donated by the community. His trusty janitor's cart stood in the corner, clean and empty, like a sentinel watching over this change. Early morning light filtered through the small window, catching dust motes dancing in the air. Eli ran his hand along the cart's metal handle, remembering countless nights of quiet work, hymns hummed under his breath, and that first miraculous moment when Noah had whispered in the lobby. Quite a change, isn't it? Eli turned to find Vivian in the doorway, dressed in her usual tailored suit, but with a warmth in her expression that had become more frequent lately. She stepped inside, careful not to disturb the neat rows of instruments. Sometimes I still reach for the mop in the morning, Eli admitted with a gentle laugh. Old habits. The maintenance staff says you set the standard impossibly high, Vivian said, glancing at the spotless cart. No one can get the floors to shine quite like you did. It's all in the rhythm, Eli said, tapping his fingers against the cart's handle in a familiar pattern. Same as music. You find the right beat, and everything flows. He reached into the bottom shelf of the cart, where a small silver bell had been carefully wrapped in a soft cloth. It was the bell he'd used to signal the end of his cleaning shifts, its tone clear and bright even in the quietest hours. I wanted you to have this, he said, holding it out to Vivian, a reminder of how it all started. Vivian took the bell carefully, its small weight settling in her palm. The janitor's bell becomes the music director's gift? She raised an eyebrow, but her eyes sparkled with understanding. More than that, Eli said. It's about transformation, about how something simple can become something meaningful, if we let it. Vivian studied the bell for a moment, then gave it a gentle ring. The clear tone filled the small room, bouncing off walls that had witnessed so much change. It was the same sound that had echoed through empty corridors during night shifts, but now it carried a different kind of music. Noah asked me this morning if we could put a piano in his room, Vivian said, still holding the bell. A year ago, I would have said no immediately. Too messy, too loud, too unpredictable. And now? Now I'm wondering if we can fit a small keyboard next to his bookshelf. she smiled, shaking her head at her own transformation. Warmth is safety, right? Right, Eli agreed softly. Down the hall, voices began to filter in. Children arriving for the morning listening circle, parents chatting, Lena's guitar being tuned. The hospital was waking up to its new rhythm. Eli reached for his guitar case, propped against the wall where his mop bucket used to stand. Ready for your first official listening circle as board chair? Almost. Vivian placed the bell carefully in her jacket pocket, then straightened her shoulders. Dr. Patel says we have 3 new children joining today. The more the merrier, Eli said, stepping out of the supply closet. He took one last look at his old cart, grateful for its part in this journey. They walked together down the brightening hallway, their footsteps falling into an easy rhythm. The sounds grew louder, a tambourine shaking, a child's delighted giggle, Marisol's warm voice greeting newcomers. Through the windows, morning sunlight painted the corridor in shades of gold. Outside the listening circle room, Noah's voice rang out clear and confident. Eli, I learned a new song. Just a minute, buddy, Eli called back, adjusting his guitar strap. Vivian touched the bell in her pocket, its presence a tangible reminder of change. You know, when I first saw you mopping the lobby that day, I never imagined. Life has a way of surprising us, Eli said, his hand on the doorknob. Especially when we leave room for a little music. He opened the door to a chorus of greetings, the sound of children's laughter and scattered musical notes filling the air. The space that had once been a quiet reading room now hummed with life and possibility. Eli stepped forward, his old mop replaced by a guitar, ready to lead another morning of healing through harmony. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next.